Still have DVDs.
DVDs. My work boots. Living out in Oklahoma, you gotta have a good pair of boots. Welcome to Seeing is Believing, the show that explores the deeper aspects of film. I'm here with Stephen Michael Brown, our esteemed critic, who is ready to take us away with his review.
It's great to be back on with you, Christopher Wagnon.
It's good to be with you.
Fantastic. Well, let me start with a review. And our film today, Christopher, is The Killers of the Flower Moon, which is Martin Scorsese's 26th narrative feature film. It wasn't one and done when the West was won. And a new 1920s set historical drama unfurls across the Oklahoma terrain with an operatic ferocity exposing an underbelly of unholy history repeating. Director Martin Scorsese divines American tragedy in an epic morality tale about how greed conquers goodness, bringing his thoughtful themes, genius lensing, and sometimes uneven take on how white capitalists endeavored to wipe out the oil-rich Osage Indians by infiltrating their families and stealthily silencing or assassinating those blocking them from their bounty. The gifted director protracts his story through a hefty running time and across the landscape of a handsome production design to show how a simmering cauldron of corruption takes root and manifests. Two of the director's lifelong muses, Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, take on critical roles. Leo plays Ernest, a slightly dim-witted infantryman who returns home innocently enough and finds himself drawn into a crime dynasty. Robert De Niro is menacing as his cattle baron uncle and mob puppeteer. He's fittingly named King and sees a way he can exploit the nouveau riche First Nations people to fatten his own pocketbook. In a quiet, soulful, and often sidelined performance, Lily Gladstone plays Molly, the woman capable of standing in the way of these two men's toxic machinations. The film's crafts stand out as phenomenal. It's a stirring work, prompting audiences to reckon with their own culpability and letting power play get in the way of respect for humanity. Overall, Killers of the Flower Moon is a stirring work well-suited to its perpetually pensive and powerhouse auteur. Christopher.
A powerhouse auteur indeed. Blown away, as always, when I hear your reviews. It's always a treasure to have you on, to speak with a subject matter expert like you in this. Speaking of which, we're missing a subject matter expert right now. If we could maybe pan over to him, he's behind the scenes, abandoned us.
We miss Jose on this one. We understand he had a movie theater viewing of this that wasn't optimal, where maybe Taylor Swift, who we love, might have been blasting him out of the room during a quietly poetic movie, and we'll definitely let him get the full experience of seeing the movie in its pristine form.
Confession, I was partying next door listening to Taylor. It was awesome.
I can't wait to get a good viewing of the Scorsese's latest endeavor. I'm a huge fan, but I can't review it until I see the real thing with the real sound and the real picture. So.
Yeah.
See you soon.
We're all about quality here, folks, so we cut them. We cut the director. But I'll tell you what, amazing film for me. Seeing that bustling Oklahoma in the 1920s, it brought back some special memories. I myself lived and worked out in Oklahoma for a couple years, and I'm telling you, the accents between the Osage, between the who were behind and in front of the camera, the accents from the locals there in Fairfax, the whole setting, that red dirt, it just. There's something special about it, and I miss my people out there. So Wolfpack, shout out to you. But, there was also, and I believe it was Scorsese who said it himself, this movie wasn't just like a whodunit, it was a who didn't do it. And my goodness, the character, Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, easily one of my new favorites. And a couple other folks, Jason Isbell and Sturgill Simpson, some pretty, really big country music, Americana singers, made appearances acting in this. And I'm telling you what, they did a good job. So other than that, I was gonna talk to you because the movie opens with something very spiritual. It's like a meeting of the 25 families in the tribe. Did you notice anything that might have been biblical or spiritual?
Well, I did. I think the faith of the people of the Osage tribe was a very big part of the story. You saw them worshiping, you saw them going to church. And there were also parts of the movie that were very biblical. Scorsese's had a long history with grappling with faith and his Catholicism. His last movie, Silence, definitely was one that focused on that a lot. This one sort of started off in sort of an Eden-esque quality, where the plains, the beautiful plains, the flowers growing on the plains of the Oklahoma terrain, looked a little like Eden. And just like in the Garden of Eden, when there was a plot point that changed, where human beings had to make decisions on their own and made wrong decisions and bad decisions some of the time, I think the oil exploding from the grounds there was sort of the pivotal inciting point of this,
Right.
that made the different folks have ways of trying to conquer one another.
Yeah.
And that was a major piece that I noticed, a very Old Testament moment. I know that you'd mentioned some other books of the Bible that you felt like you were
Certainly, I
drawn
think
from in this. You mentioned Job.
Oh, yeah, the book of Job, Molly. The character Molly reminds me so much of Job, bless her.
How so? I don't really know that story.
Okay, so well, Job in the Bible is a character, a prophet, who's very deep, like has a deep relationship with God, and God and the devil actually make an agreement. It's almost like a bet. Like the devil's like, "Hey, I bet you I could get Job to betray you," and God's like, "No, not a chance. Just see if you can try." And then all these horrible ordeals go on in his life. He loses like most of his family, lots of his kids. He gets these terrible boils and experiences pain. And I just watched her go through losing her family, dealing with chronic illness, diabetes, which is something the Osage still, it is still a big problem. And then she felt evil all around her, and the person that was attacking her, the devil, that was De Niro. But she had nothing but grace and dignity, leaned on her faith. We never heard her say anything that would oppose the Lord. So they encountered the Jesuits when they were in Missouri in the 1600s. They became Roman Catholic. Now their thought was that their faith and their spirituality actually aligned quite well with Catholicism. So they were able to kind of pair their ancient traditions with their faith. And I thought that church, the Church of the Immaculate Conception that they showed, I think they call it the Osage Cathedral, I thought it was really cool to see them doing a lot of the tribal traditions and chants and the dances together as a community, and then also together praying as a community in church. And there wasn't like this weird overlap. The movie didn't enforce it, so kind of cool for me.
Yeah, I thought the church was a great gathering place for the people in the movie. And
Yeah.
I think there's a line early on where she asks the Leo character, "Did you go to church?"
That's right. That's right. For one of her first questions.
Yes, very important in the courting phase. Right
That's
there.
right. She asked if he was Catholic, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm Catholic." She goes, "Well, I didn't see you at church." So we talked about the faith aspect of this, and I've talked about some of my favorite actors in this, but what were some of your favorites?
Yeah, well, I agree with you that Lily was a great force. Some people have seen her on the TV show Reservation Dogs and seen a very different character.
seen it.
And so in this, she's very quiet and graceful. A lot of things happen to her, but she's the strong and steely type that you really want to learn more from. In fact, if I had a quibble with the movie, it might be that we could have used her even more forcefully. She could have still been the same character, but maybe just used it a little differently in the story. But I couldn't help but be dazzled by Leo's character.
Really?
To want to be playing a person who was corrupted so thoroughly. He's very dim-witted. He's definitely got. He obviously has a hero mentality coming into the story and an anti-hero tragedy as it's going on. And I just think the way he performed in that role was really strong. And I think he and De Niro both have worked with Scorsese many times, brought lots of characters to life, and there's clearly a trust there in working together. And I thought he was a standout performance. I expect all three principals in this will be nominated for Oscars.
Really?
Yes.
I like that. The gentleman who played the FBI.
Jesse Plemons. Also amazing.
Amazing.
Used very little in the movie, but
Right.
definitely the face of Jesse Plemons coming in as the no-nonsense investigator was a welcome character.
Oh yeah, his answer when he meets they open the door. He's like, "Why are you here?" He's like, "To find out who did it."
Absolutely.
But honestly, I think those characters. I think he could have been the lead too. I think he could.
Right.
have.
Originally, they were reverse casting, where it was actually going to be that Leo was coming in as the FBI agent to tell the story, and it turned out that they had the idea of sort of telling it from this morally corrupted individual's perspective.
Yeah.
I would say the next evolution of that could have been to tell it from her perspective.
That would have been nice.
But you can
more
only do
so.
so much. I think you're an Irish New Yorker making a movie, and your storytelling perspective is that of telling crime stories and telling stories about the evil that men do. And so you don't expect Martin Scorsese to transform himself into someone who could be the vessel to tell this story accurately.
Right.
I think there's a little bit of a foreshadowing in the movie that says, hey, I hope other people, even from the Osage Nation, might tell this kind of story and continue to tell it from their perspective. So he
Right.
realizes that he is a storyteller of this story, but maybe not intending himself to be the final storyteller of this particular tale.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the people, the Osage Nation, could be really proud of the work and collaboration they did with him, because they actually helped, a prolific director adjust
Absolutely.
the production.
It became a lot less about being just a crime thriller, like you said, the whodunit, and became a lot more about the types of characters that were involved in that piece of history and giving you insights into what was going through their mind, what was going through their lives then, and being able to see it through these sympathetic and unsympathetic characters.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about, there are a lot of characters in this film. It is literally the whole town, the whole tribe, and then the outside, the federal agents coming in. It's like, oh my gosh, it just keeps growing, the cast. But like we keep going back to the central focus, Molly, very reserved, reticent, didn't say things, and you wondered, right? Like we often wondered, like you said in the review, like does she know like what's going on, like that someone else, like at what point does she know about this great tragedy that this town is inflicting on over a couple dozen fallen members of their tribe, several within her own family. But it's interesting, a lot of and it goes to this story. This story wasn't really in the public eye until, it's kind of now. Artists are bringing it to life. That's what we kind of love about film, right? Is that these stories that may have been a blurb in a history book or may have been completely missed.
Right.
Like the Tulsa tragedy.
Yeah, there's a parallel story to the exact historical times of this one. And it's alluded to at least once in the film about the Tulsa race massacre.
Yes.
And we've, as a nation, kind of reckoned with that over the past maybe decade or so. Maybe many people knew it before that, but it to be in our consciousness like it is now. And I think these the stories of the murders of the Osage people is not something that was in the consciousness until this book came out and this movie. And so I suspect this is a chance to reclaim history and to tell that to more people and to learn from it. And that's ultimately, I think, what Scorsese is trying to do. I feel like it gets a little rushed when you get to the court proceedings. It's like, you know who did it, so what are we trying to do there by showing the court procedures? Right. But, I definitely think John Lithgow and Brendan Fraser and some other people show up for some scenes there, and I just didn't think those were any good.
Oh, so you thought they distracted from
it
the
wasn't
film?
even the fact that it was those actors playing it. I just thought that it didn't go anywhere for me.
Yeah.
Like the movie was going one place and all that happened, and it seemed like a very long postscript, and it just didn't take me to a new place. I was still kind of following the character arc of the three main people.
Right.
And I feel like it was not quite the movie it was before once those things started happening.
It definitely had an air to that where it became two separate movies. It started out as this tragedy that kept happening over and over again, and no one could do anything for these people and except for them. They had to pay a federal agent to come out and help them out. That's historical, not a spoiler. So the Bureau of Investigation came out and were paid to be there. But it's interesting, like we said, this really reclaims history. But I think that's a critical aspect to Molly's character development. The reason why she is as quiet as, I think that's a demonstration of how quiet everyone has been while these things have been going on. Like the silence itself is horrific, and the lack of care. A really good job seeing artists come in and treat a project not like anthropologists and studying these people, but actually
getting into their heads.
Getting into their heads. Man, that was cool. And I thought Lily Gladstone did a good. I heard that she was channeling her. I think it was her great grandmother, who was Blackfoot, and also who kept that tradition, also Catholic. So she was able to kind of lean on some family stories, and then from the people of the Osage. They were able to kind of inform her. I thought she did great.
You know, the movie, Christopher, had a sprawling runtime, and a lot of people have talked about that. Like, does it feel like a long movie?
Yeah.
I feel like maybe I thought it felt a little longer. I think you felt like it was pretty brisk, all things considered.
Yeah.
But I'll say it kind of speaks to the notion of what is in a big epic movie that you see in the theaters. You know, a lot of us went to Oppenheimer this year, and it was another kind of 3-hour opus that basically had some different stories told in different orders, and some of them were, to some people, more interesting than others. You know, the last hour of that one, some people have said they thought its momentum went down. I actually found that to be a very thrilling hour of it.
Yeah.
But in this one, I felt like it lost a little steam, and the question is, will people see this in the theater, or will, you know, those of us who are watching this podcast or studying this movie, will you watch it on Apple Plus, and will it be something you take in installments, and how does that viewing pattern affect a movie where you're breaking it up into installments?
I'd love
Like
to
The
see the metrics
Irishman.
on that.
The Irishman, which was his Netflix film that Scorsese did, was one that I actually remember watching in installments. I thought it was a little long.
Yeah.
And on this one, I'm glad I was sat in front of a theater, watched it with other people. I watched it at a critics screening, and everybody was, of course, very thrilled to be seeing it. It was one of the movies that we were most excited about this year.
Yeah.
And but it was definitely worthwhile to be in that sort of, I don't want to call it a temple, but a sanctuary space to be able to be one with the movie and to watch it that way.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very valuable way to see this movie.
Absolutely. I bet that heightened some of your senses too as you were watching to give the review that you did. That makes sense. And it's an important point you bring up with it being an Apple TV feature, which is a streaming platform. And then the movie was introduced by Scorsese himself, saying, "Hey, you made a choice to be here and watch it in front." And it seemed like that was really important.
Yeah, it was important to him to get this movie out there and to be able to just share it. It's something he's had in his heart for a long time, and it was really great to see it on the big screen. I hope people will get a chance to do that.
When I was there, I noticed audience reactions.
Oh, tell me more.
I mean, I heard people. There was a lot of "Oh no," or "Not again." Like people frustrated. You hear like someone like smacking their chair. Like they were really they had some empathy for these people. What was it like when you?
I had a pretty academic audience that I was with.
Yeah,
that was sort of quietly studying it.
Yeah.
I will say, without any spoilers, that there were some moments in there where you sort of can't believe the extent to which evil's corrupted the main characters. And one of my favorite scenes was actually there were a couple, but there were several times where Lily Gladstone's Molly was using a bit of truth serum on Leo's Ernest, and asking him, I have this trust in you to do this for me, or I have the trust in you as my partner to do this, or can I trust you? Have you told me everything? Have you told me everything you're up to? And I thought those were some really powerful moments of the movie.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of be watching it all in sequence to be able to feel that collective build, that perpetual motion that's going on in the movie, to sort of feel like how these years are going by, how this relationship is evolving, and how the things that he's doing that might be a petty crime down to some bigger things is sort of taking over his heart in the movie.
It really does. Yeah, he continues to, the spiral keeps going deeper and deeper, and Ernest, like, he loses the importance of being earnest, I guess, and then finds it
Oscar
perhaps.
Wilde reference.
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, okay, you talked about the pace of the film, and then we mentioned the great music. So that for me, Robbie Robertson and his tones, the way that kind of helped me, I don't know, there was a constant thump.
Yeah, there was
thump.
a heartbeat, a sort of a thunder to the film.
Right.
You mentioned that you thought he evoked maybe some different animal sounds.
He did. So I believe that like he used the steel guitar to make a coyote sound when he was in there. But I think that the director was saying he wanted something that was scary and energetic, maybe a little I don't know, alluring or sexy perhaps, but also something in the landscape that invoked the landscape. And I don't know. Well, it's interesting with about Robbie Robertson. You know, he grew up on a reservation and began doing like rockabilly style music. And I believe he met the director when they were on Mean Streets together. But he also, so if you got a concern for pace, all right, I got a recommendation. If you're the kind of person who can watch Gangs of New York, can watch The Departed, watch those two films, for instance, in a movie theater, and you really enjoyed the music, Robbie Robertson. And if that made the movie feel like a little faster pace for you, Robbie Robertson.
Yeah.
Did I mention that I like him?
I think you do.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I mentioned 26 movies from Martin Scorsese. He's also got about 17 documentaries that he's done. Lots are about music, like The Last Waltz. And so it's interesting how much he cares about the music that's used in his films. He's sort of the pioneer of what they call the needle drop, the idea that there'd be a song you wouldn't have expected in scenes.
Yeah.
You think back to Goodfellas, where some of the girl groups, the doo-wop groups, were used in some very violent scenes.
Right.
I think he employed the score by the late Robbie Robertson in this in a way that was really evocative and really thoughtful. It wasn't. It sounded a little more contemporary than I would have thought for the time period. The first time I heard it, actually, to my ears, was like, oh, that's some interesting sounds that I'm not imagining in that time period.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really, really strong. I mean, he used Peter Gabriel in The Last Temptation of Christ. I mean, there's a lot of different weird uses of music that he's brought into bear in his films.
Absolutely. I think about that one scene in the convenience store when
In which movie?
in The Departed, when DiCaprio's like beating up the guy and it's like, no, or whatever, just happy music playing, like the doo-wop, like you said with Goodfellas. And with Scorsese, back to the historical element, this guy takes his history seriously.
He does. I mean, you think about the way this movie looked, the feel of the town that was created, the production design, and only in that way did it remind me of Gangs of New York. And you're taking it back to history, even Age of Innocence,
right?
Where he's going back and telling you a bygone era, but the same mores that are instructional in that time period as well. But I think he clearly worked with the craftsmen, the craftswomen of the Osage people to be able to get it right. The women in this movie, the characters in it, are they called blankets? Are they called?
I don't know what we would call their costumes, but their outfits were gorgeous, and it was as realistic. I mean,
it does. It's sort of even the weight of their costumes puts a certain posture in them and a certain way about them that actually informed what I thought their acting was like. The weight of the world was on them, and so I definitely feel like the costume designer did this movie a lot of service by getting that so right.
Wow, and historically, maybe, I mean, you know how these trends develop. Who knows how they evolve? Why we wear the clothing we do? But there could be, I mean, with what their plight over, from being relocated from Missouri to Kansas to, and just from a historical element, the Osage. The movie begins like a history lesson. We learn about the Osage Nation, and they're considered, one of the civilized tribe. They would not like that term, I don't think. I don't think that people like the Cherokee would prefer to hear that term, a civilized tribe, but that they were, some of those tribes that were considered, civilized in those times, but still, like, you could see that in spite of that, in spite of their connection to the town, the wealth that they were bringing, the almost assimilation, right? Because people were marrying, Osage were marrying the white people. Ernest himself, was white, and I think that the Osage people really definitely have contributed a lot to their legacy through the making, and I think with all the people who worked. Like the Osage that worked on this film, like on Scorsese's crew, doing the costumes, being behind the camera and in front of the camera. Man, like you said, I hope to see more out of them. Can you discuss without spoiling what your favorite scene was, or one of your favorite scenes?
I will just mention something I liked about the movie.
Yeah, tell me.
Aside from the scenes of that I thought of the husband and wife in the discussion of betrayal and trust. I liked just what it said about storytelling in general, like who tells the story. And I think there's some ways that Martin Scorsese bookends the film. I won't give a lot away about that, except for that it starts off almost like a silent film, where you have the title cards and some history notes from that. And I think it evolves all the way through, I won't say all the way to modern times, but it brings some modern sensibility into it. And I really like that because Scorsese's basically saying that he's not the last person to tell this story. and he hopes more people will. So I think his power here is to challenge others to tell great stories. I think that's why some of us really love him as a filmmaker, is that he really loves movies. He loves what the power of cinema can do. And he's challenging those around him to tell stories that inspire, stories with purpose, stories that try to make us think about how we could become our better selves.
Do you think that this will, and you think this story definitely meets that criteria?
Oh, I do. I think it's a very powerful movie. I think he's got a lot on his mind, and I think a lot of that is showing up in the film.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know if the discipline of telling the story as tightly as I think it could have been told was there. Who am I to judge the genius of cinema about how he did that?
Right.
But I think you've said it's probably a top 5 Scorsese for you. I don't think it's quite that to me yet, but who knows?
Well, and like I said, there was an emotional aspect to this, and one part we didn't cover. You know, I'm a war vet. I came home. I worked in Oklahoma. That was where I ended up. I ended up in the Midwest coming out of the Army. And how fortunate was I to have the mentors that I had out there, and to be able to come into steady employment and not have to be confronted with a lot of the issues that I think a lot of veterans were in World War I, particularly infantrymen. You'll notice some of the props. We have some infantry gear back there. But I will tell you, watching him and his fall, I felt some empathy. And I think that in some ways, through struggles and trying to get on the right path, ultimately it comes back to, for me, and I think for Ernest, if he had kept leaning into the faith like Molly had suggested, and been more earnest, perhaps he could have protected his family. And man, as a husband and a father, like, who's watched his marriage fall apart, like I was like, dang, I kind of see this. I didn't see myself exactly in Ernest at all, but I certainly empathized. I empathize with a lot of veterans who come home and struggle like that, or at least they're looking for the right group. And man, he had the ability. I mean, it was just amazing. You would think when he comes in and he meets this character, the king, the De Niro, how kind and compassionate, and he wants to get to know him, but you could tell like it's manipulation.
Yeah, I mean, he's a cattle bearer, and he sort of sees Leo as like the latest livestock that he's got to get what he wants. It's like, hey, you're just an animal in my world to do what my bidding is. Stay within the walls that I'm creating. Stay within the fences. Do what I want. He's sort of the kingmaker in that town. I think it'll be interesting also about who sees this movie. There's clearly the film bros, the Scorsese lovers, the folks that wouldn't miss any of his crime thrillers and that sort of thing. Then there's the people who might like to see it because they know Leonardo DiCaprio is in it. And, his character is very unsympathetic. It's an unsettling and a difficult watch in some people. I'm not propagandist for the movie. I'm saying it's a difficult watch. But I think people who give themselves over to these themes will really be enriched. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot here to chew on. It's a good movie to have a conversation like we're having about it.
Right.
And I'd be interested to see how it plays over time. Mm-hmm. It's certainly an important movie. And I think that it'll be very instructional to people to see it.
You're right. It is instructional, and there are lessons, particularly around trust and who you trust and how you trust and why you trust. It's something you have to think about, because there's nothing but betrayal time after time, particularly with the character who has the most grace. She reminded me of Saint Juliana too, who's the patron saint of chronic illness, because she played, a character that had the chronic illness with diabetes, but also started an order of nuns in the 12th century that in Florence, Italy, and part of their big thing when the storm came up and she's sitting with her husband, I thought that was actually beautiful. She's like, we need to be quiet now. There's something powerful about a storm. And St. Juliana, a saint from the church, started a lot of prayer and meditation amongst her order. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then she had the chronic illness too. And there's a really cool story about a miracle in there. We could take this, leave this, or take it out. But she was suffering so much, St. Juliana, before she died, she couldn't eat or ingest anything, just throwing up, and it was terrible. And she asked the priest, she wanted to receive the last rites and receive the host, the body of Christ. But she couldn't she couldn't eat anything. She just literally couldn't ingest anything. So he said, I'll rest it on your chest. And then within a few moments, it just disappeared, apparently.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I wish there were certain moments that Molly could have just disappeared and gone away. But man, she is a strong, resilient woman. And her story doesn't necessarily, I was pleased, I think.
No, absolutely.
I was pleased.
Christopher, before you wrap us up with some of the different items about who was behind this episode, I wanted to call out the Osage Nation Foundation, a nonprofit that's still doing great work for the people of the Osage Nation. And we made a donation in their honor as part of filming this episode. And we hope other people will check that out as well.
Absolutely.
Christopher, I know that you've got a lot to say about Oculus Media and the future work we do.
Well, absolutely. You know, like you know, Oculus Media is passionate about exploring the deeper aspects of many things, not just film. So there's going to be plenty of other shows on the lineup. We're about to have an inaugural, our first episode of Doubting Thomas Speaks with national speaker Craig Scott. We're very excited about that, and it's really coming together. And I think that what sets us apart is our commitment to delving beyond the surface level of all things, and, you know, not just movies, and just take the time to fully digest content and air out conversations like this, so that our audience can have, you know, see a refreshing approach to reviewing film. And then, you know, a lot of people will go and see this film and they won't take a lot away from the faith, though those aspects are in there. It's very important. A Scorsese movie, it often is. But I think that when one goes to watch a film, why not be in tune and listen and find out what lessons there may be from above, though it might not be completely evident. Perseverance was one of those lessons. So as we persevere and get ready to do our next shoot, we're going to have to close right now. I just want to thank our audience for taking the time to stop in and stay with us. Please like, subscribe, follow, do all the things. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and we are grateful for you and thankful for you. You really helped our first show become a great concept, and we're going to see you on the next one. Onward.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Stephen. Good job.